Monkey D. Dragon is too powerful. So powerful that any move he makes, if implemented even slightly incorrectly, could cause a catastrophe of historic proportions should anyone survive to record it. So a few months ago, I made a video outlining why it feels like Dragon does nothing in One Piece. That video was primarily a meta-analysis of how Oda implements Dragon in the series, which tallied up every appearance he'd had in One Piece, which at the time was 29 times, and of those 29, 23 of them featured Dragon sitting, standing, or monologuing, aka doing nothing, which gave us a Dragon do nothing rate of 79.3%. The rate's actually higher now because he's appeared a couple more times, again, doing nothing, so we're somewhere in the 80s. But to be clear, as fun as the meme is, I don't personally think that in-world Dragon is doing nothing. More that Oda portrays him as doing nothing the vast majority of the time, and I think he should have been much more sparing with Dragon's appearances. But the truth of the matter is that Dragon is so strong that it's actually chastised him. In the same sort of way that Whitebeard was only really able to show a fraction of his power, because using any more could quite literally destroy the world. And Dragon, he's very observant, especially in regards to the East, which is actually over there. But Dragon has learned from the actions of those around him, which include Whitebeard, Roger, Garp, and even his own spawn, Luffy. Dragon is a man of complex motivation, which we're going to dissect in this video. However, his primary role is not and has never been to be the direct agent of change. Rather, Dragon's purpose in this series is to be the man who fans the flame of revolution. And before getting into this, I should also say that Parvision also has a good video on this topic, which I have linked in the description. He made some good points. One of which is that almost every major faction in this series consists of more or less the same structure. Whether it's pirates or marines, there's a tendency to stack the top with heavy hitters who carry the faction on the front lines. Like the 3 admirals, the 3 all-stars, the 3 sweet commanders after Snack got the boot, and even right at home with the monster trio of the Straw Hats. One Piece is a shonen manga, so generally the higher we go, the more powersome the character. And this is even true of the 5 Elder Stars, who were for some time thought of as more traditional politicians, just regular old dudes making decisions from their old man room. But Egghead Island proved us very otherwise. The Revolutionary Army is a very different entity though. A lot of the other factions in One Piece stack their top with power because its main purpose is direct combat. However, the Revolutionary Army does not exist to fight people's battles for them, but instead to encourage people and give them the ability to fight for themselves, as can prominently be seen, for example, through the abilities of Bella Betty, who increases the power of those around her with rousing topless speeches. Thinking about it, Luffy and Dragon actually have very similar philosophies of liberation. As the not hero Luffy is, he will not help people who refuse to help themselves, like when he refused to help Momonosuke up until the child said that he wanted to be Kaido. And even in the most extreme case, when it came to Nico Robin, he still waited for her to say that she wanted to live. It's not good enough for Luffy to step into other people's business and fix the problem. Because if the person he helps doesn't learn from this and grow a stronger will, then that problem is just going to happen again down the line. And I believe that this is Dragon's view with the Revolutionary Army as well, except that he and Luffy disagree on the ultimate methodology, with Luffy taking a very active approach to this problem solving. That is the magic of Luffy. He sees beating someone up as the solution to all of life's problems. Dragon does not. Also, this video is brought to you by a paid partnership with BetterHelp, a platform designed to connect you with a credentialed therapist trained to listen and provide you with helpful, unbiased advice. Therapy is something that everyone can benefit from, and to me, it's about personal growth and problem solving. It helps me get an outside perspective to better understand my own habits and develop healthier ones, as well as to find more effective ways to solve problems that will improve my emotional well-being, which BetterHelp does very effectively, and it's incredibly easy to start. You just fill out a questionnaire and you'll be matched with a therapist in as little as a couple of days. In our very on-demand world, a couple of days might not sound so fast, but the reality is that finding a therapist near me could take months, and that's if I'm lucky. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp makes sure that therapists on the platform are well qualified, and if the one you're matched with doesn't feel like the right fit, then no worries. That's very common, and you can easily switch to another therapist that you can really connect with. The whole idea of BetterHelp is to make the journey of starting therapy easier, and I found it to be an absolutely brilliant resource that caters to my lifestyle, which most things do not. So if you think you might benefit from a therapy session, then click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/groundlinereview for a 10% discount on your first month of therapy. So give BetterHelp a go and see if it's the right fit for you. But for now, it's back to you, me. And in fact, Dragon often sees his forces engaging in direct combat as an almost guaranteed way to make things worse, which is why his operations are usually more founded in espionage. So to take Bella Betty as an example again, she herself is probably quite powerful, but her purpose is not to fight directly. And that goes for the rest of the commanders as well. All of them are in their positions primarily for what they provide to support and logistics. Karasu's Logia powers are primarily utilized for scouting and transportation, Morley's ground manipulation for infiltration, and of course Lindbergh is basically the Q of the Revolutionary Army, constructing all sorts of fun assorted gadgets. Each of them can fight, and at very high levels as well, as we saw them taking on admirals at Marijua, but the goal there was never to beat the admirals. It was to distract them so that they could free Kuma. Even Emporio Ivankov can be seen as a support figure through his hormone injections, which can force a Bello Betty style effect if needed, and really the only person I'd maybe call a straightforward fighter within the army is Sabo. And that's because Sabo is a very literal representation of the flame of revolution, especially now with his brand new and shiny Flame Emperor title, which you might think takes away from Dragon a bit. Hey, Sabo mate, this is my army, I'm the head top guy, but it actually doesn't. Because Dragon, in all of his winsome glory, has again always had the primary role of serving as the fan of the flame of revolution. Let's talk about wind. In literature, wind is often described as one of the four following symbols. Wind is a symbol of strength, it is a symbol of freedom, a symbol of change, and a symbol of one more thing that I'm not going to tell you now because it's going to be relevant and fun later. Look forward to it. But again, Dragon is not that flame himself. That role has been given to many other characters across history, with Luffy and Sabo being the two most prominent figures in the modern day that Dragon is fanning. But Dragon's first experience of this flame was Goldie Roger. Dragon was present at Roger's execution, which is something we often ignore because it seems to have such little bearing on Dragon's actions. But like everyone else around him, this day was a very formative event for Dragon. On this day 24 years ago, Roger lit a flame that would rapidly spiral out of control, manifesting as the Great Age of Piracy. That was Roger's intention, and it did ignite the events that would eventually lead to the dawn of the world, or at least I assume so. It still has yet to happen. It would be unfortunate if it didn't. However, Roger's action also resulted in terrible events happening as well. The mass killing of infants in South Blue, the dramatic global rise of piracy victims, the reign of the 4 emperors and the 7 warlords coming to prominence and causing untold pain and suffering across the planet in the name of becoming the next pirate king. And if we wanted to name a very specific example, then that name would belong to Don Quixote do Flamingo, who, as a direct result of Roger, went on to become the tyrannical ruler of Dressrosa, having killed thousands and destroyed the lives of hundreds of thousands. And that's just that one nation. He also started his own slavery business with the auction house on Sabadi and was a bit of a general dickbag. But the argument here is that Dragon saw what Roger's actions resulted in, and Dragon experienced what happens with an uncontrolled flame, which was, yes, a great degree of good, but at the cost of a tremendous amount of pain and suffering, none of which Roger intended, but it happened nonetheless. And not only that, but Dragon has also seen the results of the other side of the spectrum. It's heavily implied that he was once a Marine, and he has also borne witness to the flames lit by the world government, which have also resulted in that tremendous pain and suffering. So Dragon doesn't want to start any uncontrolled fires. He's seen what they do. It's not good. So when the flame of revolution does take hold of the planet, Dragon wants to fan it very precisely, so that it can be as effective as possible and minimize the amount of suffering, which some may argue is futile, but Dragon is trying nonetheless. Whereas his son Luffy is more on the Roger side of the spectrum when it comes to actions. However, as stated previously, the way in which Luffy conducts these actions is actually more on the Dragon side, because Luffy inevitably inspires those he's helping, which leaves the islands he intervenes in significantly stronger, and more importantly, significantly more united than before. And that's because Luffy, as the main protagonist, and the man who has inherited the will of a sun god, sits very much in a happy place where things almost always work out for the best somehow. No one else in the world is in his position. And while Dragon likely possesses immense personal power, that also comes with immense personal responsibility. Because Dragon is so powerful that even a minor misuse of his abilities could result in a historical tragedy. To use this example again, another person in his position would be Whitebeard. Sengoku claims that Whitebeard had the power to destroy the entire world, and given that he wanted to protect his family, Whitebeard could never use the full extent of those abilities. Even during his last stand at the Paramount War, Whitebeard couldn't think of anything except for the safety of his sons. And if it was just Whitebeard alone on that battlefield, then he could have effectively snapped the Marines out of existence. Which is part of what makes Blackbeard so dangerous, because he and his crew have such reckless disregard for their own lives. To them, it's all up to fate, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Blackbeard use the Gura Gura even more potently than Whitebeard did. But speaking of Whitebeard, he is another cautionary tale for Dragon. When Ace was captured, Whitebeard dropped everything and summoned his full forces to engage in the Paramount War, which on paper, terrible idea. Not only did it lead to Whitebeard's death, it also led to the dissolution of the Whitebeard pirates, and it put every island under his protection in dire peril. But also, it didn't even work out. Whitebeard failed to rescue Ace, he died anyway, and from many perspectives, this could be judged judged as one of the biggest mistakes in One Piece world history. And perhaps events like this are the reason why Dragon doesn't do things like say drop everything because Ginny has been abducted by a world noble. Because Dragon sees the risk as far too great. We can't just summon our full forces for one person because we're gonna get destroyed. Which brings us back to the symbolism of wind. Again, I said it had 4 major meanings. Wind is a symbol of strength, freedom, change, and it is the symbol of uncertainty. And of all the words I would use to describe Monkey D. Dragon, uncertainty is I think what suits him best. As a windmill, Dragon possesses strength and he is working towards freedom and change, but he is perpetually plagued by the uncertain outcomes of his actions. TLDR, Dragon's power is one of those situations where your will of D is so big that you need to be extremely careful when you turn around, because it's gonna cause some damage. But Dragon also has one more thing contributing to that uncertainty. During one of the many Egghead Island flashbacks, we see Dragon speaking with Vegapunk on O'Hara, and Vegapunk states that Dragon has a hatred of war. And even before then, it had been heavily suspected for quite some time that Dragon either is or was a pacifist. He has no desire to harm anyone. And if we look back on it, the only confirmed person who has ever been harmed by Dragon's actions was Buggy when he was attempting to execute Luffy in Logtown. But Dragon isn't quite as trigger happy to enact change personally as opposed to other people on his level. So he's all about min-maxing revolutions, which to his credit has led to the rather brilliant food shortage strategy at Marijois. With minimum effort and casualties, the Revolutionary Army was able to strike the Marijois food reserves, which is now threatening a famine amongst the world nobles. It's very clever because the world nobles insist on separating themselves from surface society, which has put them in a very easy position to be sieged, because living 10,000 meters above the rest of the world makes importing food a logistical nightmare. And now, instead of fighting against the world government or the Marines directly, those factions are beginning to turn on one another, all because the world nobles can't have their precious snacks. Although there is a potential solution to that problem now, which is if York can find a way to power the Egghead Island food replicators in the Holy Land, then this famine could sort itself out. But the point is that this shows Dragon's thought process. As we've explored before, Luffy, he solves his problems by beating up the problem-making guy. And if Luffy was charged with figuring this out, then his plan would be to walk up to Emu and thwack him in the face. However, as much as St. Charles might say, Dragon, my eyes are up here, Dragon is aiming lower, but not too low. Get back up a bit. There. Dragon's plan was to strike them right in their well-rounded bellies. And that actually makes me wonder what Luffy would think of his father's actions. A lot of Luffy's empathy in One Piece revolves around food, like becoming Rebecca's ally for life after she gave him lunch even though she tried to kill him, or beating Kaido so that Tama could eat whenever she wanted. And the world nobles are undeniably despicable, but I don't know if I could ever see Luffy being okay with anyone, no matter how horrendous starving. But to add to Dragon's support role in this whole endeavor, we should also talk about the previous revolutionary island base Baltigo. In the manga, every establishing shot of this island is plagued with wind, the kind of winds that we usually only see whenever Dragon is present. It's characterized by these rather thick white lines, indicating something quite fierce and elementally unstoppable, which we've seen both in Logtown and the Grey Terminal as well. And something that still hasn't been quite explained yet is why nobody could find Baltigo until Jesus Burgess hitched a ride from Dressrosa. And from there, Blackbeard had to be led to the island via Vergis's Vivia card. It's like how seemingly the only way to find Zoe is to possess the Vivia card of someone currently on that island. So another potential reason as to why it looks like Dragon is doing nothing is because he could be using his powers to obscure the Revolutionary Army base. Dragon could have any number of weather-based abilities, not just wind, and may have influenced the magnetic force of the island and not allowed log poses to lock onto it or something. Or he could have done something more like Nami and create mirages, a colossal Fata Morgana obscuring the island from view. It could also be that the wind he creates is just so fierce that you would never sail into it. But in that case, you'd always know where the Revolutionary Army are. They're in the windy place. But again, this could explain why Dragon almost never makes a move himself. He has to be present to shroud the base of the army, which would otherwise be crushed by either pirates, marines, or even Cypherpol. And that would make Bartholomew Kuma's flashback hit even harder. It's not an amazing look for Dragon to have found out exactly where Ginny was taken and then done nothing to get her back. When I talked about this during the chapter reviews, I had a fair few people justify it by saying that the Revolutionary Army simply were not equipped to take on the challenges of invading Marijois just for Ginny. And that, whilst not thematically satisfying, may indeed be true. However, I think it would be absolutely ball-crushing for the real answer to be that Dragon had to make an impossible choice. He could have gone with Kuma to search for Ginny, and he may very well have succeeded in finding and rescuing her, but it would have left the entire army vulnerable, and he had to stay and protect them for the greater good. Doing the exact opposite of what figures like Luffy and Whitebeard would have done, which is bet everything on the life of a single person. Luffy declared war on the world government to save Robin, which in his case worked out. Whitebeard declared war on the world government to save Ace, and in that case, it didn't work out. It's the uncertainty of the outcome. Yes, Dragon could have taken action. Together with Kuma, they may very well have been able to save Ginny, but at what cost? Dragon is well aware of his role in this story. He recognizes that he is not the main character, and thus he needs to play the fictional pirate game a bit more carefully than most. And when the time is finally right, he will fan the flames of revolution in just the right direction, at just the right ferocity, to bring down the world government. But as of right now, he's still uncertain as to exactly what that direction is, but hopefully it's east because he has a lot of experience with that particular direction.